All right, today we're going to pull back the curtain on something that's all around us, but we barely even notice it. We're talking about public policy. You know, the blueprint that shapes everything from the roads you drive on to the very air you breathe. Let's get into it. So let's start with a quick question. What do things like traffic laws, those recycling programs in your neighborhood, and even public health guidelines all have in common? I mean, think about your day. You probably followed a traffic law, maybe sorted some recycling. These things feel totally separate, right? But believe it or not, they all come from the exact same place. Yep, you guessed it. They're all forms of public policy. Every single one is a choice made by a government to try and solve a specific problem or meet some kind of need. These are basically the invisible rules that guide how we all live together. Okay, so let's really nail this down. What exactly is public policy? The easiest way to think about it? It's the government's master plan for, well, pretty much everything. So, at its most basic level, public policy is just the collection of everything the government decides to do. It's not just a single law. It's this whole ecosystem of laws, rules, regulations, and even government programs that are all designed to tackle societal problems and steer us in a certain direction. Now, this quote from Thomas R. Dye is absolutely brilliant. He says public policy is whatever government chooses to do or not to do. And that second part, that's the real kicker. Because policy isn't just about passing a new law. Deciding not to do something, like not regulating an industry or not funding a social program, that is a policy decision too, and a really powerful one with massive consequences. And Richard Rose adds another layer to this. He points out that policy isn't just one single decision. It's a whole course or pattern of activity. So it's not a one-off event. It's a continuous process that unfolds over time. And to round it out, Carl J. Friedrich gives us this great perspective. He sees policy as a strategy, right? A proposed course of action to reach a goal. This really drives home the point that policy is always looking forward. It's designed with a purpose in mind. Okay, so this brings up something that trips a lot of people up. We tend to throw around words like policy, goal, and decision as if they're the same thing, but they're not at all. So let's get the language right. Let's start with policy versus goals. A goal is where you want to go. The policy is the car you build to get there. So a government could say, our goal is to eliminate poverty. Great, that's the destination. But that's just an idea, right? The policy is the actual program, like the Integrated Rural Development Program, with real funding, staff, and a plan to actually try and make it happen. And it's the same deal with policies versus decisions. A decision is just one choice, right? A single move. But a policy, that's the entire game plan. It's a whole string of connected decisions that all work together over time to form a real strategy. One chess move versus the whole match. All right, now that we know what a policy is and what it isn't, let's look at the different kinds. Because governments have a whole toolkit of policy types they can use, and it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation. So let's take a quick look at this toolkit. You've got substantive policies, which are the big ones that affect pretty much everyone, like funding for public schools. Then there are regulatory policies. Think of these as the rule books for business, like environmental protection laws. Distributive policies are interesting. They give specific benefits to certain groups, like subsidies for farmers. Then you have redistributive policies. These can get pretty controversial. They deliberately move resources from one group to another, like through progressive income taxes. And finally, capitalization policies are all about money moving between different levels of government, like federal money going to states to build highways. So, how does a policy even get made? Where do they come from? It's not like someone just has a brilliant idea and poof, it's a law. There's a whole process, a kind of life cycle that turns an idea into actual action. Usually, this journey has about 5 key stages. First up is formulation. This is where a public demand or an idea gets shaped into a real proposal. Then comes interpretation, where all the nitty-gritty details get hammered out. After that, education. You got to get the public on board. The fourth step, implementation, is arguably the most important. This is where the policy meets the real world. You actually have to do it. And finally, you have evaluation, where you step back and ask the big question, did it even work? But, and this is super important to remember, this is not always a clean step-by-step process. The real world is way messier. The source material calls it intricate and dynamic, full of hidden channels and constant activity.
Sometimes a policy is being made and you don't even realize it's happening. Which brings us to the biggest question of all. Why should we even care about any of this? Why does public policy matter? Well, it matters because at its heart, it's about what kind of society we all want to live in.
So let's just quickly recap the key ingredients of a good policy. It has to be purposive, it needs a clear goal, it has to be what's actually done, not just talk. It needs a time frame, a deadline, and it has to follow a defined process from start to finish. You get those things right, and you've got a serious tool for making change happen. Because ultimately, that's what this is all about, building a better society. Good public policy is trying to foster development, strengthen our communities, and basically build a better nation for everyone.
And Thomas R. Dye gives us this really great way to think about why it's so important. He breaks it down into 3 reasons. We study it for scientific reasons, just to understand how our government and society actually work. We study it for professional reasons, to use that knowledge to go out and solve real problems. And of course, we study it for political reasons, to make sure that we, as a society, are pushing for the right goals in the first place. And that really leaves us with the biggest challenge of all. The whole point of public policy is to serve the public interest. But in a society as diverse as ours, with so many different people, with so many different values, who gets to decide what the public interest actually is? And that right there is the question at the very heart of public policy.